We are back here where we are here. Hashtag we are here. Yes. Common Square. Hey, so listen, we've talked about good things like mental health, access. You know what's something that we have to talk about? It's cliche. But everybody say love.
Love.
Everybody say love.
Love.
And take that down what? Common Square. Okay. So love, you know, love is also hard to access sometimes. Oh.
It just got real quiet in this dude.
You know, love comes in many different ways. It can be either loving yourself,
yes,
loving each other, the love of family, the love of accepting someone or a community. So love is just like, it's so complicated too. Mm-hmm. You know, for someone who grew up in a house where I really wasn't told I love you was a big deal to me. Like, I remember the first time someone told me I love me, and I was shooketh. I was like, oh shit, this is it. Oh my God, this man just told me he loves me. And I grabbed onto it, and I didn't want to let go because it was the first time in my life somebody told me I love you. You know, and the same way he told me I love you, he also broke my heart. And he broke me. So, you know, that's with love, is like, bitch, it's so complicated. But I feel like sometimes, cliche, when you don't love yourself enough, how can you expect yourself to love someone else too?
That's a really good point. So I'm gonna bring this like to 3 different parts and try to make it quick because y'all know this ain't my conversation. Because I'm still working on what love means to me. So for me, it's hard to talk about love because I'm now learning what self-love looks like. I didn't love myself for a really long time, and I feel like there was so many different variables that I can pinpoint why I didn't love myself. And I think one is survivorship.
Yes.
Is another reason why you don't necessarily always potentially love yourself, because you're so stuck in self-preservation mode and survivor mode that sometimes you can dismiss love or just not receive it in ways that people are giving it to you. But I think once again, this boils down to family, nature versus nurture.
So oh, bitch, that deep voice, you heard that?
Right, it was like nurture. Nature versus, not because I had to like clear my throat too at the same time.
Let's do it.
It was like, we clear our throats?
I think she's cleared.
So like nature versus nurture, it's like, I grew up in a very drug addicted household. So for me, I didn't even understand like the fact that there was even abuse. So I think what I got conditioned to is we model who we're in front of or who we're raised by as what love is supposed to look like. So when you see, for me, I had both of my parents in the house up until I was 11 years old. It's like, I saw a lot of toxic love. So therefore it became the norm for me. I thought toxicity was love, and that you were supposed to fight for that love because giving up wasn't an option, even though you are drowning and draining in said toxicity. So how can you really build a really healthy love and then teach that to your kids? My mother used to hug us, but it wasn't like, we didn't show a lot of love to one another, which in turn trickled down to my kids. And it made me think, like, how much do I kiss my children? How much do I hug my children? Because that's not something that I necessarily was shown when I was a kid. So now I'm taking on these behaviors, adopting them. Not only that, but we talk about nurture, but what about the nature? In our environment, sometimes we see a lot of broken homes. At least for me, in the space that I grew up in, I saw a lot of like white middle class families being able to stick it out. But as far as like the black families that we had in our communities, it was always, you know, broken. And so for me, that became like the norm. I just thought that, you know, this is regular for me.
And I think that that's just it though too. Like sometimes when we see what people present to us of like affection or just support too, like even as like a person of color, like it's so hard to know when society has a different perspective of loving you as a person.
But also trust, right? So if you grow up in a household where there's no trust established, you know, being in an abusive home because of the drugs, it necessarily wasn't always physical, even though sometimes it would lead to that. It was always this feeling of like walking on eggshells. Like there was a space where I just didn't feel protected. The only time that I really found resolve for myself or a safe space was within my own self. And I think that changed, or I should say transformed, into a very protective person where I didn't trust anybody. I didn't want to let anybody in. I just wasn't there, and in turn suffered a lot because I was in abusive relationships when I got older. Just got out of an abusive relationship, and also am very abusive and didn't realize what those abusive behaviors were like. My abuse may not be physical, but my abuse in emotional manipulation, my abuse in verbal, because words matter, right?
Yeah.
So the ways that in which I was treating my partnership, and even infidelity, it was like these are things that I had seen over the course of my life and adopted because this is what I thought was the norm for me. Now looking at it and really doing the work and digging deep into, okay, these are reasons why I don't trust, because if you don't trust your own mother, it's kind of hard to trust society. But then also I grew up, I'm an 80s baby, so I also grew up when the AIDS, the HIV/AIDS pandemic and the crack pandemic were huge. So for me, it was also like I'm watching other Black folks discriminate against other Black folks because of their sexual orientation. I'm also seeing the government pollute our communities with drugs and just to turn a blind eye and just leave. And because of that, this is where the broken homes come from. This is where the abuse comes from. This is where the non-self-love comes from. And for me, it's like, okay, I can't trust my household, but I also can't trust society. And then on top of it, identifying as queer, I really can't trust society. And being Black, I can't trust society. It is all of these things compiled into one. So how can I love myself when the society in my household doesn't love me?